Hello everyone, this is CounterYolo, bringing you another video talking about Star Trek Online. And in today's video, I'll be going over the Section 31 Lockbox Starship comparisons. And so in this video, I'll be going over the Starship comparisons, starting with the Science Destroyer, and then going to the Klingon Battlecruiser. I'll do a couple of slides about the Section 31 Lockbox itself, because there's a ton of stuff coming out in this Lockbox, and then some general thoughts on this. Tomorrow there'll be a video on Facebook about me talking about Florian's recent post that came out about a week ago at this point. Whenever that video goes up, it'll basically be a week. So you feel free to see that as well. If you're watching this literally the day that this video comes out, you'll need to wait about a day or so. But it is a really important post about kind of like the state of the game for a lot of your meta DPS chasers inside the game. Feel free to see the time links in the description for a couple of the important things in this video. Now, for the stats of these two ships, they aren't really that big of a departure from what I was expecting. I mean, a Science Destroyer, I was expecting it to be a little bit lower in stats than the Mara Crossfield, because the Mara Crossfield was a promo pack, and this is not. Completely makes sense there. Obviously, with its tactical mode, it's going to be you'll be able to switch between Commander and Lieutenant Commander to be switched to Lieutenant Commander and Commander Tactical. Completely makes sense there. Because in the show it was called Dark Mode instead of cloaking. That's what they're calling the cloaking mechanism. No idea if that's going to be a better enhancement to cloaking than what it normally is, or if it's just going to be a special visual, and that's what all it's going to be. We'll have to wait and see. It is a very fast destroyer, though, so that's something to keep in mind. Now, for the Klingon Battlecruiser, it's an interesting ship. It has a 1.55 hull, but it still has a decent turn rate. Its impulse is slightly slower. A lot of your Battlecruisers, you'll want to have at least most of them typically a 0.15 impulse, which, considering everything, I guess that's okay if it's a little bit slower, but it's able to turn so that it's easier for it to ram into stuff. Then I guess that's totally fine. It's got 6 bridge officer seats though, which is interesting. We've had one other ship in the game with 6 bridge officer seats. It was a warship instead of a Battlecruiser, but I'll still show it in this video anyway later. And it's got battle cloak like basically any of the KDF ships recently inside the game. So yep, I'll go ahead and briefly now go ahead and go over the Science Destroyer in terms of its comparisons. Whenever we look at the raw stats, it's very, very close to the Fleet Scryer Intel Science Vessel, which I think makes sense, especially with some of the visuals inside the game. You already kind of felt a little bit of a Section 31, well, or at least a darker type of theme for it, which makes sense why you could kind of do comparisons of things with this for a Section 31 type ship. My personal conspiracy theory is that the crossfield from our Discovery show was very much inspired by this particular ship because it has the little gap in here. Of course, there might be other ships in Star Trek as well that have that gap in the middle of its saucer, but that's just my conspiracy theory. It has the impulse of the Fleet Nautilus, which is interesting as well. I mean, considering everything, I think this ship is pretty decent. I mean, still, as I'll keep on saying for a while, I recommend going with C-Store ships first if the C-Store ships are serviceable enough and the aesthetics don't conflict enough with you. I mean, pretty much at this point with this particular ship, if you have a Section 31 themed Federation captain, you're probably already going to buy this ship anyway. It is going to be a decent ship for you. Now, obviously, comparing to the other Science Destroyer and Spearhead ships in the game, as I talked about in my recent Starship classes video, Science Destroyers and Science Spearheads are both in the same class of Starship. As I was exploring stuff inside the game, they're basically the science versions of your tactical destroyers and tactical warships. The Spearhead is just a warship, but the science version. That's basically what a Spearhead is. Science Destroyer is obviously a regular destroyer, but science-ified. So that totally makes sense. As you can see here, the stats aren't really out of the realm. A little bit lower than the Mirror Crossfield, but that's to be expected because of how you get the Mirror Crossfield versus this one. Pro Pack versus regular Lockbox. I'll get into some interesting things about that in terms of probabilities about lockboxes and things in about a week or so. A little bit over a week. I just feel the Prime Crossfield is probably is overall the best one because of its really high hull, and it still has decent shields. I personally like this ship the best still of all of them inside the game. Section 31 ship still is interesting. It's got a different look than the Crossfield. So if you want a science-like ship but didn't want to fly the Crossfield because you didn't like the looks, well, you have a different option now inside the game. And then of course, just around this out as well, some more ships from the exchange that are kind of similar is the other Ultimate Mission Science vessels in the Sphere Builder ship and their Herc ship. Honestly, most of the other science vessels in the game are quite a bit more too different for me to include them in this list. So now we'll talk about the Klingon Battlecruiser from this pack. And I'll first compare it to the weird ships just because this ship is a little weird. It's serviceable by all means, it's just a little weird. And comparing it to the Ferengi Nadi warship, if you want to compare the bridge officer seating with everything, I think our KDF Battlecruiser turned out decent for its bridge officer seating considering everything. If you want Ox to Bat, you're probably going to make the lieutenant here in engineering. That would be my guess at this point. 4 tactical seats is okay. I mean, more would be better as a battlecruiser, but I think, I don't know. And at least your science seat has it as a specialist seat, so you could actually have it as 2 intel abilities instead of science abilities. Because I know a lot of you don't like the science stuff inside the game. It's cool that they put the other intel seat there so that you could ignore the science stuff if you really don't like science for your battlecruisers. The General Light Battlecruiser is the other weird one though. Just a few comparisons here, because this ship has 2 commander seats. So, which I think was an interesting addition to the game. Most captains agree you basically need to make this commander seat a tactical one. And I didn't color that correctly. Anyway, but yeah, it's definitely some interesting ships here. In terms of from the fleet, obviously the Miracle Worker Battlecruiser is still, in my opinion, is probably the best overall ship in the game. It's got its own weird Discovery aesthetics, just like our current Battlecruiser does. At least the aesthetics for this one make sense because you've got the nice little curve there to ram it into a ship. That's what its console allows you to do, which is cool. The other notable battlecloak ship from the fleet is the other intel ship. If you look at the bridge after seating, it's actually pretty close in many aspects. Whenever you discount, I mean, this ship has 6 bridge after seats, so it couldn't have a second lieutenant commander seat. Well, it could have, but then you would have had to. Well, you would have had 3 ensign seats with 2 lieutenant commanders, and I'm not sure that would have felt really good for a lot of people. Now, for the other very noteworthy battlecruiser for the fleet overall has a commander on temper operative. The commander engineering command ship inside the game is a dreadnought cruiser instead of a battlecruiser, so that is not in this comparisons list. But that was in a very recent Starship Comparisons video, so you can feel free to check that out if you so choose. The Fleet Moog is also a very durable and well-rounded ship. The Fleet Moog is the fleet version of the Kirk Battlecruiser, which is the battlecruiser that has emergency weapon cycle. So it's basically the fleet version of the KDF alternate of the Arbiter. So for a lot of you that are battlecruiser people inside the game, this bridge after scene should be very familiar to you. When it comes to the Sea Store, the only ones that are actually good anymore, because the Dreadnought cruisers are just terrible now, are the battlecruisers from the flagship set. And I mean, sure, they're 4-4 instead of 5-3. The big thing that keeps these ships relevant is that you're able to use the flagship set with these ships, and the flagship set is just really powerful. Two of the 3 consoles are really good. With their 2-piece bonus, the 3-piece bonus is really good for tank captains. Although for tank captains, you would prefer the Federation versions because they have command track fire. Just saying. But these ships are still very good, very solid hull and shield ratios considering everything else inside the game. Starting off in the exchange, we'll talk about the TOS ships first. The Dreadnought Battlecruiser, as I mentioned in that Starship Classes video, it's its own weird ship. It's got a hangar bay, but unlike what the STO Wiki says, because the STO Wiki is wrong, the ship does not have command track fire. It's got a cruiser command similar to what you expect from a regular battlecruiser, so that's why I have it in the battlecruiser section. The D7, for the long time, was actually a really high tier battlecruiser because it had a battle cloak, and most other battlecruisers just had a cloak. Now that most Klingon ships nowadays get battle cloaks, a lot of the value of the ship has diminished. There are a lot of people who will still buy this ship just for the aesthetics itself, though, which is totally fine. I mean, because your ship is, for the most part, your main is what you see as your character for the most part in a lot of missions. It makes sense that, hey, if you really want your character to look a certain way, and you're willing to spend the money, it definitely makes sense to me. I'm not going to spend the money on this ship anymore, but if you want to, you're more than welcome to. As for some other weird battlecruisers, the Sona is another Intel cruiser inside the game, but it doesn't have a cloak. At least there isn't a cloak listed on the STO Wiki. I guess it definitely could be. I've never actually flown this ship. If there is a cloak, just let me know in the comments. Also, if I've made any mistakes on these stats, let me know in the comments, and I'll try to get your comment higher up in the comments. This is a Synkethi ship. Is more reminiscent of a durable science ship for its hull and shield stats, but it is a battlecruiser with a Lieutenant Commander Miracle Worker seat. The Tall Shard Battlecruiser for Tier 6 has sensor analysis, just like the Gorkon Science Battlecruiser from the Sea Store. It also has very good hull and shield ratios too. So it does have that going for it. The Lockbox Battlecruiser is probably one of the best cross-faction battlecruisers that has a battle cloak innately built into it. But I mean, it only has 3 tactical consoles, so it's not going to be one of your harder-hitting battlecruisers inside the game. And the Alachi Battlecruiser, it's quite a bit older, so it's not necessarily as good. I mean, you've got a lot of command abilities on it, so it's still going to be a decent ship for your torpedo builds inside the game. There's still better torpedo platforms, but it's still going to be a serviceable one. The Valwar Azteca, yeah, it's for some reason that Battlecruiser has 2 words instead of 1. It's still in the Battlecruiser class. Overall, when we're comparing these 2 ships, I kind of like the KDF version a little bit better, but that's just me personally. When it comes to the raw stats, I like the visuals a bit more for the Valwar, but I also own a Valwar ship, so I might be a little bit biased because of that. For the Lockbox itself, there's so many traits, consoles, kit modules, and things. There is a reason, a legitimate reason why a lot of your couple of main SEO YouTubers out there that tried to cover this stuff took a day yesterday, and a lot of them spent an hour or so covering this stuff. I think that's part of the reason why they delayed talking about the stats of these starships by a day, was so that it would give a lot of them a time to talk about these things inside the game. I'm not going to go over that. I think there's been enough discussion about that from a lot of other YouTubers. I would just point out the things that I think you should be watching out for. In ground and space, the unconventional gear and unconventional systems, in which your control abilities will reduce universal kit cooldowns and universal console cooldowns. Basically, a little bit more better in space, but a lot of your higher end DPS builds, and also a lot of your higher end tanking builds, feel free to see Florian if you're curious about that, have a lot of universal consoles. And so having a trait like this to reduce their cooldowns is going to be useful for a lot of those builds. It's going to be very situational though, depending upon what your build looks like, as to whether this is going to be almost godlike tier in terms of its usefulness for your build, or whether it's going to be it's okay. It really is going to be depending upon your build. As for 2 kit modules from the Lockbox, Stasis Bubble and Agonizer Brain Scramble just sound really strong for ground PvP. I don't know how that scene looks anymore. I would imagine those 2 are probably going to be good and very annoying in ground PvP combat. So if you're a ground PvP person, keep in mind there's 2 more strong, annoying kit modules to worry about. As for some other stuff from this Lockbox, the Boronite Lace weaponry is the biggest thing that I'm looking for, or looking forward to trying out. From the description, it sounds like this is a passive thing on your ship, but it definitely could be a clicky as well to activate kinetic rifts from your weapons. It's basically a nice thing to potentially add to your ship, to add a little bit more damage and annoyingness to your weapons, to try to gain threat easier. Computer-assisted flight algorithms might be decent for the PvP crowd. I guess we'll have to wait and see if they like this or not, especially those that like to use raiders, especially those that use the fleet barrel with its enhanced battle cloak and stuff, plus raider flanking. Pretty powerful in PvP. This might enhance that ship even further. Actually, the Discovery Legends reputation, I have to point out the dilithium store consoles. They're basically the R&D crafting consoles inside the game, which I've talked about a little bit in a different video before on the 2 consoles that I think need to be a bit improved and buffed. It's not particularly clear if they got some inspiration for this from that video. I mean, it's way close at this point, so I really doubt it. But from the dilithium store in Discovery Legends, you have PAX consoles and Belm consoles, which are basically the R&D console, except they either have critical chance added to them in the amount of critical chance that you would expect from like a fleet console, or they get a decent amount of extra maximum HP to your ship. And most of the R&D crafty console varieties are available from this, besides the specific energy and weapon types inside the game. So, like for instance, you're not going to see a R&D crafting console that, or a dilithium store console from Discovery Rep that is, for instance, a Polaron console or a or like a quantum torpedo console. What you will see is stuff like the general beam weapon one and the general torpedo one, which is from that. So, and especially because they said they were going to be buffing up the raw stats of some of those generalist weapons as well. This indirectly means that Cryptic is buffing the rainbow builds inside the game. This also means that a lot of your captains in the game, or a lot of your players in the game that don't have access to a fleet, or don't have access to high enough stuff in their fleet to get good gear from their fleet, or just refuse to be a part of a fleet altogether, they now have some extra options for additional crit chance that most other captains would already basically call for granted inside of the game. As for the space set itself, the raw stats looked okay for a lot of your tanks and general players in the game that, what's a good word for this? That would prefer to have their survivability basically just passive on their ship, instead of having a lot of your active healing to help with your survival. Unfortunately, right now, at least by a lot of testers on Triple, those stats are a lot lower than what was described during the 10-4 weekly video. Not sure if that was entirely intentional. Some of the things like with shield power isn't working quite as intended either, and working in really weird ways, especially with the shield power going to shield pen. Yeah, that exists with this set, by the way. I don't know. It's gonna be interesting to see how much the stats change between now and whenever they actually release this to us. I'm already gonna say it right now. You're not really ever gonna want the 4-piece unless you're gonna do a discovery specific, just a theme build of wanting all discovery stuff on your ship. In that case, okay, get the 4-piece. The most I would ever see you getting is the 3-piece bonus with the deflector, the warp core, and the shields, or singularity core and shields, just so that you get the 2-piece bonus of additional hull regen that scales with your max HP on your ship, and then the 3-piece bonus, which gives you some extra electrical damage that hits every enemy the first time that you hit them, and that electrical energy also scales with HP. And with those particular pieces, there's a couple of extra cool stuff on them, which, well, the warp core and the shields have extra cool stuff on them, which hopefully they buff and actually make them as good as they sounded like on the 10-4 weekly video or stream. If they do that, then this might be in slightly better contention, but I'm still going to say that for a lot of your general player base that want a tank, Colony Deflector plus competitive rep engines and shields is going to be your best option. If you're a tank captain and can afford to get the competitive 3-piece for that extra bonus damage resistance with the competitive warp core as well, that's probably going to be your best route for a lot of your end game DPS chasing maps, of keeping up with a lot of the other DPS crowd. If we're talking about maps where you have a lot of time gates on them, it's possible that this 2-piece or 3-piece set might be a smidge better in those particular circumstances, as long as there's not a lot of map moves. We will have to see. This definitely is not good in PvP. Don't get this set at all if you're going to go into PvP. Just going to say that. And lastly, for this, the ground set is melee oriented. If you want to play a melee captain, get at least the 2-piece from the set. The 3-piece is actually going to add a lot of good benefits to your character, so I still would highly recommend the 3-piece. But time device is similar to a different science kit module that I talked about before on this channel. The difference is this self-revive is just for yourself. You can't cast this on someone else. But the self-revive is also, while it's going, it actively reduces the cooldowns of your other kit modules, so that it doesn't feel as bad to have a self-revive and lose a kit module, basically. The gravity pull device is an AoE pull and kinetic damage. I see this much more as utility to get into melee more with enemies inside the game. Those are the one being melee captains. I don't know the damage scaling this to know if this is actually going to be a viable damage ability for a lot of your science wizard captains on the ground. It does have a pretty low cooldown, so it is possible that if it has decent damage scaling, that it might actually be a viable DPS option as well, especially if you don't have the consoles, or sorry, the kit modules from the summer event. This might be a very good option for you. First, final thoughts. I mean, here's a Starship training console for both the Science Destroyer and the KDF Battlecruiser. I'm not particularly a fan of any of these things over here, honestly. Glorious should be charge, not change. Glorious charge is interesting. I mean, this definitely going to be a fun ability, and there's probably people who are going to have. I don't know. If I was someone who was really good at editing, I'd probably just make a montage of a bunch of ramming through ships in a bunch of different TFOs inside the game. But anyway, for the Section 31 Lockbox overall, there's a really high amount of traits and consoles available from it. I personally think Bronze Lace Weaponry and Unconventional Systems in Space are probably the biggest things to look out for. There's a good chance those are going to be a lot more expensive than normal versus the rest of those things on the exchange. Depending upon probabilities of things, it might actually be worthwhile for you to just open lockboxes to get those things. For the Discovery Legends Reputation, we have a semi-serviceable survival tank space set right now, or from the Reputation. That the stats aren't really that great, honestly. We'll see if they buff them. We have a really strong melee ground set though. That is guaranteed. That is good. And also from this rep, we have some dilithium store consoles from it that can be serviceable alternatives to fleet consoles if you don't have access to a fleet. There is some theory crafting going on as to whether some of these consoles are actually better and some of the best in slot inside of console slots. Potentially for life or engineering slots, that's definitely possible. We're going to have to wait with people experimenting on the subreddit to see. Unfortunately, though, outside of like this, and a couple of the traits in the Discovery Legends Reputation, there's not really a lot of bonuses to enhance the meta DPS chasing crowd currently inside the game, which is unfortunate. A lot of them are the people who spend a lot of the money inside the game. Them and a lot of your space bar people spend a lot of money inside this game. But anyway, that's basically this video. Hopefully that was interesting for you all. Probably wasn't that unexpected for the starships that I compared in this video. Feel free to like and subscribe. If you like this content, feel free to also comment on any things that I missed or overlooked, or things that I should have compared that I didn't compare to. Feel free to say those different types of things inside the comments. Just do not, just don't attack each other. Talk to each other in a respectful manner. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.